paths that are not very pleasant. In our opinion, sometimes we will not be able to understand why God is allowing us to go through something difficult or unpleasant in our life, but the question: will we continue to trust in Him or will we start cursing our butt? Tragedy can be for God His starting point any path, no matter how bad it may seem. If it comes from God, it must be full of blessing, even if it cannot be seen. Jacob mourns Joseph. Paragraph mark 29. When Reuben returned to the well, behold, Joseph was not at the well. Then he tore his clothes. 30. And he returned to his brothers and said to them, the boy is not there. And where will I go? 31. Then they took Joseph's coat and killed a goat, and soaked the coat in the blood. 32. And they sent the coat of many colors and brought it to his father, and said, we found this. We ask you to examine it to see if it is your son's tunic or not. 33. He examined it, and said, it is my son's tunic. A beast has devoured him. Joseph has undoubtedly been torn to pieces. 34. And Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son many days. 35. And all his sons and all his daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and said, surely I will go down to Sheol in mourning for my son's sake. And his father cried for him. 36. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, captain of the guard. I don't know if you currently have your dad or not, nor do I know what your relationship with him will be like. It could be good or bad, but what I do know is that one of the most important characteristics of God is that He is a dad, and that even if the earthly, whether we have them or not, He is always present in our lives. In the case of Jose, after this great misfortune, he had no choice. 351. When someone was sold as a slave, their last name changed to that of the person who bought them. The last name gives you identity because part of the family is where you belong. This meant that you no longer had an identity, that your name was worthless. The enemy will always try making you lose your identity. Is a very powerful weapon, because when he comes to think that you no longer belong to the family of God, then he will take advantage of your life. And here we see Joseph sold to an Egyptian official. Chapter 39. Joseph prospers in Egypt. When Joseph was taken to Egypt, Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. 2. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. 3. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made everything he did prosper in his hand. 4. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant, and made him steward over his house, and gave into his hand everything he owned. 5. And it came to pass, from the time that he made him steward over his house and over all that he possessed, that the Lord blessed the house of the Egyptian for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he possessed in the house and in the field. 6. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's hand, and with him there he did not worry about anything except the bread he ate. And Joseph was of a gallant figure and beautiful appearance. God is with you, because if it is, you should not worry. He will always open the way before you, and you will be able to experience His impulse in your life. A characteristic of the presence of God is prosperity. I am not referring only to money. I am referring to every matter in our life in our character, in our faith, in our dependence on Him, in our health. Joseph knew the principles of God that we have in the Word today, and that is why what was in his hand increased. Can people see that there is something special in your life? You can see God as Potiphar saw him in Joseph's life. By the way, he was, and let's remember that he is 17 years old, which is what he saw. He didn't even have a Bible under his arm. And he couldn't check his Facebook profile to see what did he say about him. I think that what he saw was his relationship with God. Surely he spoke to Potiphar about that God who is invincible. Surely he saw him in the morning doing his devotional, etc. God has plans for your life. He will give you places of favor and authority, because the servants of God manifest His kingdom, His greatness, His power. Understanding the principle of stewardship. 352. It is interesting that the Bible does not lose detail and gives us a physical description of what he was like, handsome of handsome. It is important to highlight this so it will continue in the story. Joseph and Potiphar's wife. Paragraph mark 7. It came to pass after these things that her master's wife looked at Joseph with longing, and said to him, lie with me. 8. But he refused and said to his master's wife, while I am here, my master does not care about anything in the house, and he has put everything he owns into my hand. 9. There is no one greater than I in this house, and he has refused me nothing except you, for you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God? 10 And she insisted to Joseph day after day, but he did not agree to sleep with her or be with her. 11 But it happened one day that he entered the house to do his work, and there was none of the men of the house in there. 12 Then she grabbed him by his clothes, saying, Lie down with me. But he left her clothes in her hand, and he left her, fleeing outside of her. 13 And when she saw that he had left her clothes in her hands and had fled outside her, she 14 called the men of her house and said to them, Behold, he has brought us a Hebrew, so that mock us. He came to me to lie with me, but I cried out with a loud voice. 15 And it came to pass, when he heard that I raised my voice and shouted, that he left his clothes beside me and fled outside. 16 And she left his clothes with her until her master came home. 17 Then she spoke to him with these words, saying, The Hebrew slave, whom you brought to us, came to me to mock me. 18 And when I raised my voice and shouted, he left his clothes next to me and fled outside. Something that we must all take care of is the intention of our eyes. Looking is not the same as looking with desire. Carefully. And how do we resist the temptations of life? How valuable is our integrity when no one sees us? He knows that if he does something bad he will sin and offend God. He is not thinking about Potiphar, he is thinking about God. What interests him is not to offend God, who has blessed him and he has prospered in everything he does. Here is a good point to talk about grace. When we understand what Jesus has done in our lives, how he has rescued us, in our hearts there must be the intention of not offending him. 353. The treatment for temptation is to flee from it. No one is capable of handling or controlling it. There are things in our lives that harm us, therefore we must flee from them to the opposite side. Or you can try to stop drinking. You cannot try to stop from smoking by smoking. You cannot try to lose weight by eating at cheesecake factory. From the temptation to run away from one and towards the opposite side. In this life there will always be someone who wants to defame us, who wants to criticize us.